there's like this epidemic of fearlessness,
Mm.
you know,
Mm.
where like people, and I'm teaching about fear and overcoming fear during this time and helping people with anxiety and stuff. But I'm just seeing how people that have, you know, even superficially been like hanging around the yoga studios and whatever are doing so much better. You know, when I connect to people that don't have any of that, they're really having a hard time.
Yep. Yep.
And that's the kind of thing that people, you know, like when we're on our deathbed, you know, the vision of my work, I oftentimes will say, is like on your deathbed, high-fiving the grandkids, being like, you guys, this has been awesome. Do everything, experience everything, fear nothing. You guys, life is so amazing.
Hello, 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 and welcome to the Success Sessions. My name is Jessie Johnson, and I am super excited to be interviewing one of the most important people truly in the history of my whole life, David Harshada Wagner.
Hi,
This
everybody.
is the man. Yes, feel him. He's amazing. I'm just going to give my most personal introduction, Harshada. So I met Harshada probably like in the first weeks of teaching high school in New York City, which was a time in my life when I was like literally decimated. My boyfriend at the time had just like kind of fallen in love with someone else. So my heart was broken. And I was going into schools like every day, all day, and just being absolutely ruined by the emotional demand of what was required to just be in those classrooms all day, every day. So I knew that I needed something. I needed something more, but I didn't know what it was. And Harshada came in to teach meditation to the kids. And I remember thinking, like, I totally know how to meditate. Like, I had hippies for parents. We went to Quaker meetings. I like had all this skill, but no. I mean, yes and no. But anyway, we started working together, and it changed the whole course of my life. I came into connection with my own heart, with God, which was something that I didn't feel I could connect to. Harshada took me to India. Harshada introduced me to Srikala, who I'm now married to. I mean, there's so many things that you catalyzed for me. So I'm just thrilled to be here with you so many years later and getting to celebrate you and share you with more of the world.
I feel the same, Jessie. Really.
Harshada, also, I feel like it's important to name that Harshada to me is like has always held this standard of excellence as a spiritual teacher, because Harshada, you like speak truth, you teach the teachings, but you're also a very real person. You're not holier than thou. I mean, I remember that like very early in India, and the first time that you took us to a temple, you were like, there is nothing here that's more sacred than you. You live that, you preach that, you teach that, you help people experience that. It's so important.
Thank you for that reflection too. I think you should just keep talking.
I know, I was thinking I could just keep doing this the whole time. So the first question that I want to ask you is how you define success as a child, in particular, how you were wrong about what success meant.
You know, I love that. At first, I wasn't quite sure how to think about that. And then it just all came all at once. And it relates so much to a lot of what you're teaching these days, especially around sales. And here's why. And I might have a breakthrough just live on your interview right now, because this just occurred to me when I was sitting down preparing for this. But I realized that, so my dad was an architect, but he was like the VP of a sort of like mildly successful architecture firm in our town. And so he was like a salary guy, very clearly a salary guy. And I can remember in general, whenever people in our family would talk about anything relating to sales or working on commission, it was always talked down about.
Hmm.
And in particular, my oldest brother, who's 16 years older than me, so by the time I was old enough to hear any messages, he was already kind of a young adult and, you know, winning and losing in life. And he became like the standard of what a loser was in our family. My father had a really contentious relationship with him. And that was one of the things that they would always say about him, as if he were a felon or something, that he's like, oh, he's doing something working on commission, or he's, and it would be talked about like that, like, oh, like now what? Oh, now he's working on commission. And so I think this thing got implanted in me that success meant to be chosen by some power greater than oneself, some like institutional power greater than oneself, that's going to take care of you and be reliable and not dependent on your winning and losing, but dependent only on your obedience, allegiance, and ability to like stay. And guess what I lack as a human being? Those very qualities of obedience, allegiance, and ability to stay. So
thank God.
So any success, and I've had opportunities where I was part of groups or part of institutions, and sort of like I got to nurse those breasts, so to speak, professionally. But all of the great success I've ever had has been as a hunter. You know, it's like if I hunt, then I eat. But there's something in the back of my mind, and it hasn't been exposed literally until about 25 minutes ago, that I've ever really consciously thought about it. But the whole idea of being any kind of a salesperson, or anyone whose livelihood or abundance is related to sales or commissions or that sort of thing, it's in this big stink box in my early childhood consciousness. Isn't that interesting?
Super powerful.
Yeah.
So I want to hear more about what it means to you to be a hunter. I get it a little bit, but I think this is also one of your areas of mastery that I know less about. So I'm excited to hear more.
Yeah, I don't know if it's an area of mastery or if I've kind of accidentally stumbled into being able to do it, but just in the sense of my success or my livelihood, you know, ever since I was 22 years old, has been based on some form or another of teaching Dharma, teaching yoga, doing, you know, what I'm believe in, what I'm most passionate about. And it's the kind of thing where only in brief periods has that ever been like an income that I got from an organization or something. You know, when I was in training, I lived in an ashram and I got a stipend from that organization. And, you know, I had to go into personnel department once a month and meet them and do all that kind of stuff. But like, other than that, you know, the idea of the hunter is it's like, you know, anything that happens is something that I kind of made happen. And then, you know, depending on how big the game is, you know, if I'm hunting a rabbit, then I bring home a rabbit. And if I'm hunting an elephant, then maybe I'll bring home an elephant. And I'm vegetarian, by the way. But you know what I mean? Yeah. And it's like, if all of a sudden I just decide that I'm not gonna do anything, as it is right now anyway, there isn't a whole lot of reserve. And so there's both like, there's a scarcity in that, but also a scalability that, you know, isn't there in those institutional kind of arrangements.
I mean, part of what's happening as I'm listening to you is that I'm just thinking about myself. When we met, I was probably 26, maybe.
Something like that.
And I was working in public schools. I kind of never really left schools. Like I went to school, I went to college, I worked at my college, then I worked at NYU, then I went to graduate school, then I worked in classroom. Like I never left the institution. Yeah. And I think, of course, at so many levels, what you were teaching me at that time was this transcendental knowledge that's sort of true for everyone and beyond everything. And many people teach it in many different ways. But what I'm getting as I listen to you now is that part of what you were teaching me also was the freedom from the institution, that simply just by being you and not having participated particularly either successfully or interestingly with those institutions, that you were like, I remember actually, Sri and I talk about this a lot, like your innovation and your creativity and your what I now know as entrepreneurialism or entrepreneurship. At the time, it was just like, Harshada just makes shit up and then he goes and does it. And it's completely different than anyone else in my life at that time. I think that before I met you, I only saw the options inside institutions. I didn't know there were any others. And meeting you, like carved out this whole new, like, over here. And I mean, look at where I am now.
I love that. You can
That's take amazing. All the credit.
But I mean, it's interesting because I never thought of myself as an entrepreneur. And if I do, it almost spooks me. Because why? I think I would just always had thought of myself as, well, I just really love what I'm teaching. I really got to teach this. How can I make this happen? And I also need to pay my rent. So let me pay my rent. It's been in a very almost like a mission-based nonprofit organization or something. And then I would go, but I was, for all intents and purposes, an entrepreneur. So then I would end up going to like an entrepreneur's marketing training or something. And I would meet like proper entrepreneurs that were like, yeah, I don't know what I'm going to do next. I'm thinking about getting into, maybe I'm going to get into laundromats, or like, maybe, I heard that, vending machines are really hot right now. Like, what are you into? And I'd be like, well, I'm doing this course on the Bhagavad Gita. This idea to like bring people to Africa, and I think that that's something that is probably really beneficial for me to think more deliberately about in that way.
I mean, it's interesting. We are recording this interview during the coronavirus sort of peak, and at least I hope it's peak. I hope it is not continuing to peak. And as I hear you talk about it, I think partly you're naming something that's quite common for spiritual teachers and healers and visionaries and artists, that they don't necessarily think of themselves as entrepreneurs, even though they are. They don't think of themselves as business owners, even though they are. And the kind of pros and cons of that mindset. The coronavirus piece, for me, what I see is that like those of us who have been practicing spiritual life before now are like orders of magnitude that I'm not even sure we can count, better prepared for dealing with this.
I've seen that too. Yeah.
And it's like the contrast was always there, but now it's like the contrast has been turned up. Everything that was gray is now black or white. It's not in between.
Yeah.
And so I'm just like having a lot of visions, fantasies somewhere in the between of this phenomenon that I think you're describing so well, like the past culture of spiritual leadership has not been entrepreneurial, really. And there's more than just me that have been like, I'm talking about spirituality and entrepreneurship, but like not really. Like the culture has still been pretty much away to the opposite extreme. Like we need the spiritual leaders right now more than ever before. As a culture, as a community. And the spiritual leadership needs money more than ever before. So it's just kind of it's like I feel like we're at a tipping point.
Yeah, me too.
So it's cool to be talking about that with you.
Yeah, me too. And I think it's also just, part of spirituality from my point of view is just eliminating the way that we're stuck in our own bullshit. And, it's like super fresh. The egg just cracked like a minute ago for me. But that's this bullshit that I have to look at. You know, it's like, well, I don't really think of myself as an entrepreneur. You know, like but see, within that, because I am an entrepreneur, it's like that's going to be a missing piece. That's like a big, a room in my house, or even like a whole wing in my house that I just not only don't use it, but I pretend like I don't have it. Mm-hmm. And that's not gonna be serving anyone, and that's gonna invite, squatters and ghosts and everything else to move into those spaces.
Yeah. Oh, it's so powerful.
Yeah.
Well, and it's also it's just so striking to me, because it's not surprising. Like, when I hear you say it, it makes sense to me. And at the same time, there's another part of me that's just shocked, because I'm like, as soon as I claimed entrepreneurship, I was like, oh yeah, Harshada was doing this 10 years ago. This has always been an option. Oh, wow. Oh, snap. Like, it was like things that you had modeled and taught, whether you realized it or not, made sense to me a decade later.
Yeah.
Because you were an entrepreneur all the way then.
So I mean, hallelujah, and thank God and grace for that. Mm-hmm. And, full disclosure, my whole career, I've been waiting for like someone to discover me and just say, okay, here, we're going to give you this whole business structure and do your bookkeeping and pay your taxes. And you just be this brilliant spiritual healer. And, we're going to like take you out shopping and get you a look and put you, and just imagine what a pain in the ass that person would be. And what a pain in the ass I would be to that person. Thank God has never given me that situation, because it would be such a disaster. But because of that thing from my childhood of, that just like fosters this kind of like little denial piece. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I also really resonate with that piece. I think that's the waiting to be discovered, or the waiting to be picked, or the waiting to be chosen. I think that runs deep again, also for the visionaries. I don't know that it's everyone. I think that there's a lot of people who maybe we all had it, but they gave it up a lot longer. I didn't give it up. I was like, I've been secretly waiting my whole life, like I want to be picked for the makeover show. I had a friend in New York early on in my time in New York who got like randomly selected on the street. And as soon as I heard that could happen, I was like, of course I want to be that. Like, yeah, I always wanted to be picked. And I kind of experienced like I was never getting picked. And I relate to what you're saying, that at a certain point I was like, thank God, because I finally got to pick myself. I finally got to discover myself. And had I been any more, even just a little bit more rewarded in that way, I don't think I would have had the urgency to claim myself. So I really appreciate that now.
Yeah. I wonder if
I also feel like you and all my mentors and teachers, at the same time, you also discovered me. Like you picked me, and then you gave me back to myself. But I think there is also a healthy version of that happens in mentorship.
Yeah. No, I want to just completely abdicate the whole thing. I don't really, but I'm just saying that part of me just wants to just like abdicate the whole thing. And it just makes me wonder if part of the thing is I could describe that person, that discoverer, I could describe that person perfectly, and everything that person would do to bring out the most in me and make me really wildly successful. And like, why don't I just do that? I mean, I think that whoever that person is, whoever that part of my psyche is what is responsible for any success I've ever had. I just haven't like unmasked it and, had the foresight to sit down and just use it directly, maybe.
Well, so we're transitioning back. How do you define success now?
Now I define success as having an impact with what I produce and an influence also, not just impact, but influence also. And that then also creates a prosperity and a sense of ease and abundance within my material life, for my family and just for everyone around me. It's like those two things pretty equally balanced.
Mm. Can you talk about the distinction between impact and influence?
Yeah. So sometimes I talk about potency, impact, and influence. And so potency is just there being anything powerful there to begin with. And then the impact is the ability to sort of like get it out, or to, you know, literally like make an impact. But the influence is like to actually be able to sort of impregnate something and grow something. So it influence, literally it flows in whatever that impact is. It doesn't just hit it, but it actually flows into it, and then, you know, has an effect.
I love that framework. Potency, impact, and influence. Yes.
And I'm just realizing that when I first started, you know, my training days, I was, for all intents and purposes, a monk, and all of my mentors were monks. And so in that paradigm, it's all the impact and influence and potency. And the other side of it, it's not required, you know, you just have like a simple quarters, and it's not about creating abundance. It's not about creating prosperity. It's assumed that there's enough. And so that's the big difference from the way that I was reared spiritually and the way that I was like trained, and the way that my mission is showing up now.
I think that, so I ask these questions to everyone I interview now for a year and a half almost. I've been asking these same questions. Everyone's response is different. This is the first time that I feel like we get to talk about not just the child misconception, but the adult spiritual misconception. I would love to hear you speak about how that shifted. Like, how did you go from living as a monk and valuing material prosperity as a monk to what you feel now?
Yeah, I think it's really, it's going through these different seasons. And I think that initially I probably had some conceptual season where I wasn't like anti-money. I was never one of these like money is bad or like vow of poverty kind of thing on an overt level. I was never into that. I always had some conceptual idea that, like, you know, this tantric idea that it's like everything is sacred and money is just an energy and money is a sacred energy and all that. But clearly I didn't really have it like in my bones. And then kind of waded into the world, and like before becoming a dad, before having a family, I think I was like a really rich monk because I was relatively successful, but it, you know, it was like fine. Like if I lost all of it, that would have also been fine. I didn't have any skin in the game, so to speak, you know, like materially. And then I've had a season of being a dad and experiencing real life scarcity of like having to make decisions. Do I pay for health insurance or do I go to the dentist? And, you know, what if all of a sudden I were to pass away? And then what is my family going to do? And all those kind of clutchy, fiery kind of feelings. And now I feel like I'm ready to shift into a deeper experience of the season that I'm in now, which is, I don't know exactly how to articulate it, but it's like to be able to like honor that non-dual thing, how like it's all good. And this is something that doesn't just impact me, but it impacts the other people around me. and to just also recognize that I think it is an inner game. And if I have a vision for something and I believe in something, but it's showing up differently in my material reality, then there's something in the wiring that's not wired right, or there's something that's not flowing right. And so just even that interests me, just to even get that clear. And
I
then,
love this conversation.
and then more impact, and then more influence. And, you know, sometimes people will, you know, ask these questions like, well, if you had unlimited financial resources, you know, how would you live? And honestly, I would work so much more. I would get involved in so many awesome projects.
Yeah.
You know, I'd be unstoppable.
Yeah.
You know, in that sense. And so that's a huge motivation.
Mm-hmm. I love hearing that. I think that's really important. It's, you know, the Tim Ferriss phenomenon has been very impactful and influential and potent. I think it's been of huge value. The shadow side of that is that I meet a lot of people who have used Tim Ferriss's work to feed the fantasy of just basically exiting the world. Like what they really want is to just not be here.
Yeah.
Which is fine, but that's not what the 4-hour work week is for.
Yeah.
And so I just love hearing you, and I love seeing this future vision of you getting more involved rather than less as you continue to create more and more wealth.
Yeah.
And I also am just, again, bringing back the framework, because I agree that the more money we have as conscious humans, the more potency, impact, and influence we bring. Money is such a powerful, it's not the only fuel, but it's such a powerful fuel for each of those three things. So you know, that's really you. I think you turned the whole course of my life. You gave me a bunch of seeds that took many, many years to kind of cultivate and plant. But in many ways, I think that my whole body of work has been so deeply inspired by how much value I got from you and the example that you held at that time. Combined with then going out into other spiritual communities and just seeing the opposite of what I saw with you. Like in my experience, the spiritual communities that were starting to kind of take over the mainstream were either disconnected from the excellence of the spiritual transmission that you hold. They might be making money, but it felt like it was at the cost of the spiritual maturity. Yeah. Or they didn't have their financial like integrity in place. And as a result, the maturity, again, it might be that the spiritual potency was potentially there, but because the money was out of integrity, it just like they couldn't really go anywhere. So it's you know, you opened a door for me and held a very high standard. I mean, I'm even remembering like going to your office in Soho. Not the first office, like I watched you move from this first office, which was kind of like in a health practitioner space, which is cool. But then you moved into this like fancy yoga, like super blinged out, like glamorous, sacred white glory space. Yeah. It was like, that was everything you did. Yeah. So, thank you for that remembrance. Yeah. Yeah. I think that I just want to continue to reflect that your work has such long lasting impact and influence and potency. All three. And so so in this series, I always invite my teachers, anyone who's had an influence on my success, I want to bring here. In addition, I just feel like anyone who's wanting to go deeper into their spiritual life should be working with you immediately. Like they're with no further consideration at all. Just dive in. And so I have some more questions for you, but like since this is coming up, I would love to hear you just speak about how you work with people now and how people can go deeper with you. Yeah. Well, you know, being at this for so long, there's lots of different ways. People can do things online, you know, just like meditate with me. And I have a lot of material that is kind of like out and about. And
once we are gathering in groups again, I love doing retreats and bringing people to India and Morocco and all these fabulous places to go on retreat in person. But the thing that I'm the most kind of invested in now, as far as this like impact and influence thing, is really working with people privately over time. So like over 6 months. And people that are really ready to go deep and integrate, either people that have been at this for some time and need that help kind of integrating, or in some cases, people just come into spiritual life with that attitude. Like you were like that, where you were just kind of ready. You were like, okay, whatever the strongest dose is, give me that.
Yes.
Not everybody's like that. And I mean, and that's the thing where we're talking about how like some things are very like broad and popular and financially successful, but they're not that potent. And oftentimes the reason why is because if on a spiritual work, you're going to get your ass kicked a little bit, your ego ass kicked a little bit. And people will be willing to like really get their bodies ass kicked, to be in shape and to look good. And they're willing to do that. But the ego is just such a tender part of us. And I think when things start to rub people the wrong way, it's just difficult for them to do. So I kind of reserve that aspect of the work for that container, because we're in relationship. There's some time for all those things to unfold. But, this is the way that I think about it, is that it's like an investment. And it's so exciting to talk to you, because even back in those days when I was so young, relatively, I would always say, and I don't know if you remember this, but I would always say, I am training you for a lifetime of spiritual work. And that was my intention at that time. And it's just so cool to hear that, people do, people do that.
Yes.
And you're not the only one, but you're one of the only ones that I know of, but maybe others will come around later. But so nowadays what I'm doing is really thinking about, I heard this great Napoleon Hill quote. It's like, the definition of hell is meeting the man you could have been on your deathbed. And that's sort of it. It's like people to invest in, spend this time and really go deep, and you're going to use this for the rest of your life. Parents, people that are doing entrepreneurial work, people that are wanting to get closer to God. So that's like what I'm the most kind of invested in that sense right now.
I love hearing that. I mean, I when we worked together, that I know we were doing other things, and I went on pilgrimage with you 3 times in 1 year, and to India 3 times in 1 year. I'm sure we went on like 17 different weekend retreats upstate or something at the same time. But we did a lot of group work, but my biggest memories are just one-on-one with you. And I agree. I think that is what changed the direction of my life, and it has been a permanent, lasting, evolving transformation. So I can't recommend you and your work highly enough. I think it's super, super important. I think it's the most important thing.
Thank you. Yeah, I believe in it. I'm looking at it.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like right now I'm just feeling so much gratitude. So I'm just taking a moment in that.
Me too. In this time of this virus situation, people are starting to, well, do lots of things. But what I was going to say is people are starting to really understand where their investment has been up until now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like what they have invested their energies in. And yeah, it's so interesting to see how, what I've noticed is that people that haven't even had like a serious practice, but they've had some practice, even they are doing so much. Like what I said the other day is that there's like this epidemic of fearlessness, you know, where like people, you know, I'm teaching about fear and overcoming fear during this time and helping people with anxiety and stuff. But I'm just seeing how people that have, you know, even superficially been like hanging around the yoga studios and whatever are doing so much better. You know, when I connect to people that don't have any of that, they're really having a hard time.
Yep. Yeah.
And that's the kind of thing that people, you know, like when we're on our deathbed, you know, the vision of my work, I oftentimes will say is like on your deathbed, high-fiving the grandkids, being like, you guys, this has been awesome. Do everything, experience everything, fear nothing. You guys, life is so amazing. I have left nothing on the table. I'm out. On top. And on to the next thing, you know, like, but just right up until that moment to be able to really like squeeze the juice out of life, and like the Tim Ferriss thing, okay, and like cross off all your bucket list and do all those things and work however much you want to work, whatever. But the people that I work with are people who generally have a gift to give. You know, I work with the secret agents that were like sent here on a mission. And it's like, that's the kind of stuff that we don't want to leave on the table. That's the kind of stuff that we don't, you know, that we just feel like we want to like swing that bat as hard as we can, even if we have, you know, strike out so many times.
Yes. Yes.
But now that high-fiving the grandkids on the deathbed, now it's like, I can't say that because like people can't even have their grandkids around their deathbed. You know, it's so intense, you know, like this particular situation.
You know, my family has been meeting on Zoom as a group. Like they want to do it twice a week. I'm like,
it's too much.
What? These are my siblings, my step siblings. I haven't heard from really in over a year. Like we don't talk. I talk to my dad and his wife sometimes, but like as a family unit, we haven't spent this much quality time together in like ever, maybe.
That's true. That's a good point.
So we're not touching physically,
yeah,
but we are touching emotionally and spiritually, and it's actually been surprising how we're coming together in this new way. So I think your image is beautiful and worthy of holding, especially during this time. I will share actually one thing about that I have also felt like generally fearless during this time. And very appreciative of my spiritual resourcefulness, because I think that's why it's so easy. I feel very spiritually resourced. But I did have like, I don't know what happened. Shri was kind of feeling under the weather. I was feeling under the weather. There's something going on. And I woke up in the middle of the night and I was just like in a kind of very tangible panic about dying. Like today, like it wasn't today. It was a couple weeks ago, but like we could die today. And I kind of like talked myself through it, and I was like, okay, like that's not my personal preference. And immediately I was like, if I knew I was going to die today, I would not fucking go to work today. Like I would do very different things. And that was kind of shocking to me because I love what I do. But I was like, no, if I knew I had like 12 hours, I wouldn't be meeting with clients. I'd be with Shri.
Yeah.
I'd be loving the people that are like the most important. And then I kind of mapped it out, and I was like, okay, which, by the way, my client, I would actually want to like say goodbye to my clients, but I wouldn't want to coach my clients.
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't be,
yeah.
and I wouldn't freaking be interviewing people or making social media content.
Yeah.
I would be doing something else. Very selfish. Like I felt like if I knew I was going to die today, I'd be very selfish.
Yeah. If you had 12 hours.
Yeah.
If you had 12 days.
Well, so this was the interesting thing. I kind of was like, okay, does that mean I'm not living in alignment with what I really want to be doing? Should I be doing something else? And I kind of thought about it, and I was like, for me, there was a turning point at about 3 months. Like if I knew I was going to live longer than 3 months, I wouldn't do anything different. If I only had 3 months, and then I realized that number was coming from something about money. Like if I knew that I didn't have to make any more money, I would just spend all my money. I would probably I'd be done with it in 3 months, but during those 3 months, I wouldn't spend time making more. I would just, that I'm still in process around that. I think there's more for me to mine about that, but it was a really potent experience for me to kind of look at this timeline. And the truth is, I feel like I'm ready for that. I'm not excited to die today. That's not my personal preference, but I am not worried about it. And I kind of needed that little moment with myself to confront it in order to get good, to get clean.
Love it. Yeah, this is all really good stuff for people to be thinking about. I mean, it's like finding the upside of a pandemic is like, I'm starting to that's starting to sound very privileged to me when I hear people say, well, the upside is, I'm getting, through my Netflix catalog, and, meanwhile, India and, some of these other places, it's getting very dire as far as the human suffering toll. But, for sure, I mean, we're one of the first generations that hasn't had to live through something that just gave us an existential gut check.
Yes.
A world war, atomic weapons, plagues, famines, depressions, and we're just a little flabby when it comes to that. And here we go.
Yep. Yeah.
And I do, one of the things that I hear people saying that I actually agree with is that this does feel like potentially the dawning of a new age. And
I totally agree.
I remember one of the first times I ever had a conversation with Sri. We were talking, and he was talking about the ideas of the different yugas, that come from the Vedic tradition. And I remember him just saying, there's a golden age coming. And he's like, we're gonna experience a golden age in this lifetime. And he was just a very young, very pure, very, angelic, yogi at that time. And I was a little more grizzled already at that moment. But looking back on it, I think that's kind of the potential of this, is that there really is this opportunity, as we move forward. I think it's going to be a minute before we get caught in a bunch of bullshit as society again. I mean, at least as far as the sort of evos, as far as the people that are into evolution, even though we're into all different kinds of evolution, I will be very surprised if we don't emerge from this with some kind of really unforeseeable beauty of some sort. And that's what I feel really called to serve, is to like prepare people to be leaders in that, and prepare my family to live into that, and prepare myself to live into that. Does that make sense?
100%. I love the way that you speak. I love the way that you teach. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with me 15 years ago all the way to now. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with all the people that you work with. And may it be so that there are thousands upon thousands, that's my fantasy, that are touched by your influence.
Maybe so.
So how can people find you? Where's the best place for people to find out more?
So everything is David H. Wagner, H for Harshada. And so davidhwagner.com is the website. At David H. Wagner on Instagram is the most current of my social media, but David H. Wagner is also my handle on Facebook.
Okay, great.
No Twitter at the moment.
I am really enjoying your Instagram at the moment. So I like highly recommend that. If you're wanting a little Harshada light, you're not, like on the fence, you want to do a little research. I love what you're posting there. So authentic and real and deep.
There's no ass kicking on the Instagram. I'm trying to have like a warm, cuddly appearance for the general public.
It's good. It's good. Invite them in. Thank you all for watching. If you have any questions or comments, please put them in the YouTube video comment section and we will respond. I look at every single question and comment, and if there's anything that needs Harshada's eye, I will reach out to him and get him on it. And if there's any way that we can support, you know where to find us.
Yes. Thank you, Jessie. Keep up the good work. It's so cool that you're doing this. It's really such a great service to people. Keep up the good work.
Thank you. Thank you, I will.
Everything you want is already here.